City's public financing system provides a 6-to-1 match for the first $175 that a city resident contributes to a participating candidate's campaign. The New York State is now considering adopting a similar public financing program, but there is no public financing currently in place for state elections. Candidates who have run in both New York City and New York State elections, such as Jose M. Serrano and Eric Adams, have told us that New York City's public financing system fundamentally changed the way they approach fundraising. By pumping up the value of small contributions, candidates explained, the city system gives them an incentive to reach out to their own constituents, rather than focusing all their attention on wealthy out-of-district donors.
Our joint study tests whether these powerful but anecdotal candidate claims are supported by the evidence from the most recent state and municipal elections. To do so, we compared donors to candidates in the city council elections of 2009, where there was a public financing program, to the donors to candidates in the state assembly elections of 2010, where there was no such program. Here's what we found. Big donors came from relatively few and relatively more affluent parts of New York City, regardless of whether they gave to 2010 state assembly or 2009 city council candidates. The maps show those census block groups in New York City where there were donors giving $1,000 or more to either state assembly candidates at top or city council candidates below. Small donors to state assembly races came from much broader swaths of the city, but still represented only 30% of the city's census block groups, and they left large swaths of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx entirely off the map.
The map for small donors giving to city council candidates looks very different. Nearly 90% of the city's census block groups were home to small donors who gave to 2009 city council candidates. When you look at this map, which shows in red city census block groups that were home to such small donors, you can see that the entire city is covered.
Unlike the previous maps, this map shows the number of donors giving small amounts to state assembly candidates in 2010. In blue are those census block groups which had between 1 and 5 small donors, and the colors in the map intensified to red, which indicates a higher number of small donors. The overwhelming majority of the census block groups in New York City that had any small donors to state assembly races had between 1 and 5 such donors.
By contrast, the far greater geographic breadth of small donor participation in city council races didn't come from just a handful of donors in each block group. When you look at this map, you can see that there are a lot more areas in pink and red, and those areas show, again, far more small donors participating in these city council races from each census block group.
The patterns seen in the 2010 state assembly contests were no different in other state contests, as this table shows. In 2010, 11% of census block groups in New York City had small donors to gubernatorial candidates. Compare that with the city council, where 89% of the city's census block groups had small donors. The contrast between giving to city and state elections became even more pronounced when we focused on some of the city's low-income and minority neighborhoods. This map illustrates the small donor participation in 2010 state assembly races from Bedford-Stuyvesant and surrounding Brooklyn communities, which are predominantly African American and have high levels of poverty. The map shows that there aren't a whole lot of small donors to 2010 state assembly candidates.
The map showing small donor participation from these neighborhoods looks completely different for the 2009 city council races. Again, you can see here far more areas shaded in pink and red, showing a large number of donors participating. And there are far more census block groups in general in which there was some small donor participation than there were in the 2010 state assembly context. In all, 24 times as many small donors from these neighborhoods gave to city council as to state assembly candidates. These maps are a little different. What they show are the demographic characteristics of these areas, Bedford-Stuyvesant and the surrounding neighborhoods in Brooklyn. These maps remind us that these are predominantly African American neighborhoods that have high levels of poverty, that there are still so many contributions from these communities to the 2009 city council races is a testament to the value of the city's public financing system in increasing the diversity of city donors.
People in the community agree. Sheila Blanding, a member of Community Voices Heard in Poughkeepsie, New York, had this to say: "We ask for solutions to our problems, like jobs, housing, education, transportation, and they always say, there's no money. But there is money. It just doesn't happen to go to us. It's going right back to the rich and powerful. They help get these legislators elected, and they're buying the song. Right now, the system is stacked up against us. But with public financing of elections, we finally have a chance to get our voices heard. Politicians get elected by the people and for the people.